Welcome to Newsday, reporting live from Singapore. I'm Karishma Vaswani. The headlines. Putting on a show of power. Taliban forces parade the military equipment America left behind. Governing, however, is another matter, with no women planned for top jobs.
In this new government which has been announced, in the top posts, I mean to say in the cabinet, they may not be women.
An economy close to collapse. The value of the Afghan currency plummets while the price of goods soars.
The Afghan economy has been heavily dependent on international aid. Whether or not that continues, at least when it comes to the West, is likely to be dependent on what kind of government the Taliban create, what kind of laws it enforces.
In California, emergency crews continue to battle a huge wildfire around Lake Tahoe. More than 50,000 people are evacuated from the region. And the U.S. Supreme Court ignores appeals against a new law in Texas banning 85% of abortions. President Biden says it's a blatant violation of constitutional rights.
Live from our studio in Singapore. This is BBC News. It's Newsday.
It's 7 in the morning in Singapore, 7 in the evening in Washington, and 3:30 in the morning in Kabul, where the Taliban is moving closer to establishing a government now that the US exit from Afghanistan is complete. A senior leader told the BBC the government would be inclusive, but against this backdrop, the economy of Afghanistan is close to collapse, with little immediate prospect of the new Islamist rulers gaining access to the country's foreign currency reserves held in the West. Prices of essential goods are soaring, the value of the currency is falling, and many public services are barely able to function. Here's our Afghanistan correspondent, Sekunder Karmani.
The Taliban are in firm control of the country. This, a huge military parade in the southern city of Kandahar, along with a captured helicopter. But the group still hasn't established a new government, leaving many Afghans in a state of limbo. Now that the final foreign troops have left, an announcement is expected soon. The last time the group was in power in the 1990s, their regime saw public executions and women banned from working. Now they say things are different, though they admit women won't be in senior positions.
Maybe they will be in the government in the lower these things, because in every department of the government ministries, you can say almost half of the workers are women. So they can come back to their work and they can continue. But maybe in this new government which has been announced, in the top posts, I mean to say in the cabinet, they may not be women.
The uncertainty about what the future will look like has seen the value of the Afghani drop and concerns about the economy rise. The World Bank and IMF are holding back from continuing support, whilst the US has frozen reserves and most local banks remain closed.
No one has any money right now. All their savings are stuck in the banks. People are just bringing small amounts of cash here to exchange, to pay for everyday living.
I needed money for groceries, but the exchange rate isn't good, so I'm going home. The currency rate just keeps on fluctuating. I pray that God brings stability to the government and these problems can be solved.
The Afghan economy has been heavily dependent on international aid. Whether or not that continues, at least when it comes to the West, is likely to be dependent on what kind of government the Taliban create, what kind of laws it enforces. Governing Afghanistan is going to prove a bigger challenge for the Taliban than taking control of it. They've been holding meetings with senior political figures like former President Hamid Karzai, but many doubt whether they're willing to really share power. Their elusive leader, Mullah Haibatullah, may well be declared leader of an Islamic emirate. These new pictures of some of the final US troops to be withdrawn from Afghanistan. The focus now is on what they've left behind. Sekunder Kamani, BBC News, Kabul.
Well, for more on how inclusive the new government in Afghanistan is likely to be or not to be, here's our chief international correspondent, Newsday Sept.
Well, there's this magical word of inclusive is being used by Afghanistan's neighbours to try to put pressure on the Taliban to share some of the power so they don't have absolute control. But look at it in pure political terms. The Taliban have come to power much more quickly than even they expected. They now control more territory in Afghanistan than even when they were in power in the 1990s. So they feel they have an overwhelming mandate to pursue their overriding objective. And that is, we use words like government, cabinet. Their objective is to establish an Islamic system. So the choice of who is in, to use the word, the cabinet is going to be very much, they're now said to be discussing individuals on the basis of Islamic principles and Sharia law. Are these people corrupt? Did they work for the former government? And what about women? Women will not be playing a leading role. This is this new emerging Islamic emirate. Women will be playing secondary roles to men. We're hearing reports they'll play some roles, but not at the senior levels. And this is already very different from what we heard even 2 years ago when the Taliban started discussing with representatives of the Afghan government and civil society here. They had this platform of words where they said women can have any roles in our new Islamic government except the president or the prime minister, but they can be ministers, they can be CEOs. Now they seem to be rolling back from that because what happened in the past is now history. It's a new day for them, and it's a day when the Taliban are in charge.
The BBC's chief international correspondent, Newsday Sept there. Well, General Mark Milley is the US Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman. At the latest Pentagon briefing, he gave this assessment of the Taliban.
We don't know what the future of the Taliban is, but I can tell you from personal experience that this is a ruthless group from the past, and whether or not they change remains to be seen. And as far as our dealings with them at that airfield or in the past year or so, in war, you do what you must in order to reduce risk to mission and force, not what you necessarily want to do.
We'll have more on Afghanistan a little later in the programme when we'll be looking at the country's Sikh community, many of whom have fled since this latest Taliban takeover. But first, 50,000 people have been forced to leave the Lake Tahoe area of California as firefighters continue to battle a huge wildfire in the region. The area is a popular tourist destination, but it's largely deserted now as strong winds fan the flames of a blaze that's destroyed more than 700 structures, most of them family homes. For more on the scale of this fire, I spoke to our North America correspondent, Peter Bowes.
There are huge challenges, not least because of the size of this fire. It covers about the equivalent area of the city of Chicago. So you can imagine how difficult that is for firefighters to get containment around the perimeter of this fire, which is what they are trying to do. There is some good news there in that there's about 20%, a fifth of the perimeter is now contained, which is slightly better than the last few days. So it is just slowly moving in the right direction. But tremendous challenges, not least the winds. There are tremendously strong winds, and it's very unpredictable in terms of the direction of the winds. We've heard many local residents talking about the fact that they were safe or felt that they were safe in a certain area, and then in a heartbeat the winds would change and they would see the flames coming in their direction. So that is one of the major challenges, and the fact that this is a very populous area. You mentioned 50,000 people have been evacuated. Many of the fires that you hear about in California are in remote areas. They're in high up in the forests where not so many people live. This is a popular tourist destination, and the fact that there are so many people around poses another challenge for the authorities.
Yeah, Peter, you know, this summer season, the summer fire season, according to some experts, is shaping up as one of the most destructive on record. You've talked about those unpredictable winds. What are some of the other conditions that have led to this?
There are several reasons. Of course, climate change can't be ignored. There's growing evidence that these huge super fires, as they're sometimes referred to, are linked to climate change. Fires that we see now that go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And yes, there have always been fires in California, but not of this intensity. That is one of the key reasons. Also, just the prolonged drought, which you could say is also related to climate change. The fact that the forest, the foliage, the dead wood, everything is tinder dry and burns so easily. Then there are longer term reasons as well. Policies, forest policies of fire suppression over the years. In other words, not allowing fires to burn, whereas the more recent thinking is that if only some of those forests had been allowed to burn, the dead wood, the foliage thinned out on the ground, that perhaps some of these forest fires wouldn't have been as intense today.
Peter Bowes there, our North America correspondent. Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories in the headlines today. North Korea has rejected roughly 3 million COVID-19 vaccine doses of China's Sinovac biotech, saying they should be sent to severely affected countries first, particularly Africa and Asia. So far, North Korea has not reported any COVID-19 cases and has imposed strict antivirus measures, including border closures and domestic travel curbs. Police have stepped up checks at Italian train stations amid threats from protesters to disrupt high-speed trains on the first day of a COVID pass. The so-called Green Pass, which proves if someone has been vaccinated, tested negative, or recovered from COVID-19, is now compulsory in Italy for domestic flights, ferries, and long-distance trains, as well as schools and universities. The Portuguese star Cristiano Ronaldo has broken the all-time record for goals scored in men's international football, scoring his 110th against the Republic of Ireland. The goal edged him past the previous record holder, the Iranian striker Ali Daei, before he scored again in stoppage time to win the game for Portugal 2-1. The 36-year-old made headlines only days ago when he rejoined his old English Premier League club, Manchester United. Well, if you want to get in touch with me on any of the stories that you've seen so far on Newsday, the situation in Afghanistan, for instance, I'm on Twitter at BBC Karishma. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. You're watching Newsday on the BBC. Still to come on the programme. Up to 500,000 people across the UK with severely weakened immune systems will be offered a third COVID jab in the coming months.
She received the Nobel Peace Prize for her work with the poor and the dying in India's slums. The head of the Catholic Church said Mother Teresa was a wonderful example of how to help people in need.
We have to identify the bodies, then arrange the coffins and take them back home. Parents are waiting and wives are waiting. So.
Hostages appeared, some carried, some running, trying to escape the nightmare behind them.
Britain lost a princess today, described by all to whom she reached out as irreplaceable. An early morning car crash in a Paris underpass ended a life with more than its share of pain and courage, warmth and compassion.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Karishma Vaswani in Singapore. Our headlines. Afghanistan is facing a major economic crisis as the value of its currency falls, sending the price of everyday necessities soaring. Many public services are close to collapse. In California, emergency crews continue to battle a huge wildfire around Lake Tahoe. More than 50,000 people are evacuated from the region. In other news, a law banning abortion from as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy has come into effect in the U.S. state of Texas. It will prevent anyone in the state from conducting an abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected, which for most women is about 6 weeks into the pregnancy, before many even know they are pregnant. Opponents of the law say it will effectively ban at least 85% of abortions sought in the state, including pregnancies from rape or incest, making it one of the most restrictive bills in the country. Senator Brian Hughes is the author of this bill.
we had a number of prosecutors in America, a district attorney in the US, that's our elected prosecutor, and they said publicly at the end of 2019, many states are considering heartbeat laws, but if you pass these laws, we will not enforce them. So the sworn elected prosecutors saying will not enforce the law. We had to find a way to enforce the law. The private lawsuits are used in American jurisprudence all the time. Medicaid in Texas is our government healthcare system. If you defraud the Medicaid system, any Texan can bring a claim against you. In the era of consumer protection that's been under law for a long time, that's what this is about. In Texas, we protect innocent human life. And for years, we've been coming alongside the mothers, providing more funding, more help for expectant mothers. We don't just forget about them after the child comes along. We want to support those mothers while we protect that innocent human life. That's what this bill's about, plain and simple.
That was Senator Brian Hughes. Well, Samuel Lau represents the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, which provides sexual health care. He told me what this law will change for women in the state of Texas.
To put it simply, this means that accessing abortion in Texas is nearly impossible for the 7 million women in Texas of reproductive age. As you said, this is a ban on abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. That's before many women even know that they are pregnant. So it is an incredibly dark day in Texas. It is a very, very hard day for the healthcare workers and staff. And of course, all of the people across Texas who are now confronted with incredibly large obstacles if they would like to get an abortion.
Samuel, is there any chance of this being overturned at a later stage by the Supreme Court? I mean, we have heard, objections from as high up as President Biden, who has said that the bill is extreme, warning that it would significantly impair access to abortion care, particularly for low-income Texans and racial minorities.
Yeah, so we are obviously disappointed that the Supreme Court did not act to block this law before it went into effect today, but they still can. And, this law we believe to be blatantly unconstitutional and in violation of 50 years of precedent here in the United States. We are, Planned Parenthood and our litigation partners are going to continue to fight this in court. And we continue to call on the Supreme Court to block this blatantly unconstitutional law that, like I said, has made the constitutional right to an abortion practically inaccessible in the state of Texas, which is the second largest state in the United States.
But Samuel, it is fair to say, isn't it, that this is a hugely divisive issue, obviously not just in Texas, but around the country. And as unpopular as it has been for many Texans, it also has some support, doesn't it? An April poll found that nearly half of the state's voters do support this.
Well, I think if you look at Texas and across the country, there is no state in the nation where banning abortion is popular. And I think no matter how you feel about abortion, we can all agree that a law like this, which again allows your neighbor, an abusive partner, a complete stranger to basically become a vigilante and sue you, it's a sue thy neighbor law, for making your own personal medical decision is not something that anybody wants. These are decisions that everybody should have the freedom to make on their own with their families, with their loved ones, with their medical provider. We don't want politicians making those decisions for us. We certainly don't want complete strangers doing that either.
Meanwhile, the group of medical experts which advises the UK government on vaccines has announced that up to 500,000 people across the country will be offered a third COVID jab in the coming months. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation says it will be targeting people with severely weakened immune systems. However, the JCVI has still not decided whether 12 to 15-year-olds should be vaccinated. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
This daily cocktail of immunosuppressant medication is vital to prevent Hal Cohen's body from rejecting the kidney donated by his father. But the transplant medication also blocked his immune system from developing protection from 2 doses of COVID vaccine. the 40-year-old from North London is now eligible for a third dose.
It's going to be really great for me to have a booster and hopefully give me some vaccine protection, the ability to turn to normal life, do things that other people are doing without thinking about it. But at the same time, it's not clear if the booster is going to work for myself and people like me. So we really do need to carry on looking at other treatments. See if there's any in here.
As well as transplant patients like Hal, those with blood cancers or advanced HIV will also be eligible. They'll all receive Pfizer or Moderna jabs.
We hope it will top up their immunity levels. Some of these people will not have mounted a good either antibody or T-cell memory response to 2 doses of the vaccine. And we hope a third may help those individuals.
There are 2 more big decisions due on vaccines. Firstly, whether the over 80s should get a booster dose to help with waning immunity. And secondly, what about jabs for younger teens? With the new school year getting underway, there is mounting urgency for a decision on whether all 12 to 15-year-olds should be offered a COVID vaccine. Currently, only those with specific health conditions are eligible. But the scientists making the recommendation say they want to see new data on the benefits and risks. This is Emma just before she got COVID. More than a year later, the 14-year-old often struggles to walk because of persistent nausea and dizziness. A new study has found a significant minority of children do get long COVID.
Yeah, so I had to be in a wheelchair because basically the dizziness is triggered, or it gets worse by me walking around. If I start walking around, I just feel like I'm going to pass out. So it was very hard for me to get around school.
Vaccinating all over 12s would help suppress COVID outbreaks in schools. The US, France, Spain and Italy have all taken this approach. A final decision in the UK may come next week. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, let's go back to our top story, Afghanistan, with the Taliban now back in control. The country's dwindling Sikh community faces an uncertain future. The history of Sikhism in Afghanistan dates back to the 16th century, but many Sikhs have fled since this latest Taliban takeover, even despite assurances that they would be safe under the hardline Islamist group. Karanjee Gaba is an Afghan-Sikh refugee who left Afghanistan with his family back in 2007. He's now a model living and working in London. He told me more about the history of Sikhism in Afghanistan.
Sikhism itself, it's backdated in 15th century, and since Guru Nanak Dev Ji, when he came to Afghanistan, he left his presence there, and since then the growth of the Sikh community has begun, and since then we have been growing, and for centuries and centuries my ancestors and my family have been living in Afghanistan until obviously things got worse and we have to leave the country to come here, or my family members have to go around the other cities.
Yeah, Karanjee, how strong is the Sikh presence left in Afghanistan now? Can it survive the latest upheaval?
At the moment, not a lot of Sikhs are left behind now. So from what I know, there were some few that were living in Jalalabad. Now they have left the city, and also in Kabul as well. So there were about 100 to 200 people living and staying in the Gurdwara itself. But because things got worse and now they have fled to other places. So from my knowledge, from what I know and what I've heard from the sources who I know of, there are about only 2 to 5 people at each Gurdwara left who will be looking after the Sikh Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And other than that, I do not know how many people are left behind.
I know it's very difficult to speculate, certainly, on what kind of treatment they might get in the future, but the Taliban has provided some assurances that minorities will be looked after, despite the fact that there will be Islamist rule in the country. What are people telling you about how safe they feel or how convinced they are of this?
So a lot of people have said, obviously, nothing is happening right now, but from the previous experiences, they're very unsure of what step the Taliban might take, because right now they have assured the people, obviously they will be supporting them in case anything does go wrong, but we do not know what the future holds. This might be something they have said to maybe cool things down, but in the future, no one really knows what's going to happen. As you can see, a lot of people have fled the city because of the fear of Taliban, but it's very uncertain of what it's going to happen. Even with the history of Sikhism, we are very uncertain of what's going to happen because there is no one there to look after the Gurdwaras, the historical places, and it's very disheartening to see that our people are leaving their own homes.
Karanji Garba there. Well, you have been watching Newsday. A reminder of our main news this hour. Afghanistan is facing a major economic crisis as the value of its currency falls, sending the price of everyday necessities soaring. That's it from us. Thanks for watching. I'm Karishma Vaswani.